Okay guys, welcome back to Heavy Metal Horizons. This video is going to be part 2 of the hardest and most challenging and most stressful flight from my student flight training. So the first part of this video was in a separate video. That was the part 1. That was basically the flight from Van Nuys, California over to Camarillo, California. And this was the flight that was right before my first cross-country solo flight. This was sort of like a warm-up cross-country solo flight, but it was a very, very short flight. But I was basically doing everything that I would be doing on a longer flight, but it was all compressed into a shorter flight. So again, part 1 was Van Nuys to Camarillo, and this is part 2, flying from Camarillo, California, back to Van Nuys, California. Let's check it out. So now I'm taxiing around. I'm taxiing back for departure, which just means I'm going to go and take off right away again. And you can see I've got my taxi diagram out. This airport, in terms of the taxiways, is very, very simple, but I still I don't want to get lost. But I didn't get lost.
It's a 990 Bravo, can we tell right down over 26, clear for takeoff.
Runway 26, clear for takeoff. Right downwind departure, 990 Bravo. Alright.
Right 5, runway 26, clear for the option, traffic departing
Right
Cessna.
downwind.
Clear for the option, traffic departing 5 as well.
Okay, pattern out. This is 1100. Okay, power up. Here we go. This is full rich. 50, 55, 60, rotate.
This 990 Bravo, reset transponder, squawk 1200.
Squawking 1200. 990 Bravo.
Okay, so that was another mistake right there that I made. He says reset transponder, squawk 1200. So 1200 is the standard VFR, visual flight rules code. What had happened was I had a specific code that ATC had given me earlier when I was coming in. Part of the the after landing checklist is to reset the transponder, and you're supposed to do that. I didn't do that, so I still had that specific code, and I took off with that. And the tower guy, he can see that, and he's like, "Come on, man, reset your transponder." So that was another thing I missed.
It is pattern altitude. Wait.
990 Bravo, taking the direction of flight.
Eastbound towards Van Nuys. 990 Bravo.
990 Bravo, Roger, make a left downwind departure.
Okay, left downwind. 990 Bravo.
I got traffic inbound from the northeast having alternating problems, but I want it to be a conflict.
Roger.
So right as I start to turn to the right, he says, no, go to the left, go to the left. That was fine. That was, that happens.
Okay, there's a left crosswind, level off, and left downwind.
Cessna 990 Bravo, frequency change approved, 5 points and 124.7, point of view approach, good day.
Okay, point of view approach, 124.7, 990 Bravo, good day.
Okay, and then just like when I left Van Nuys, when I leave this airport, they're switching me over back to the larger area controller, the Point Magoo approach controller.
Point Magoo approach, Cessna November 9990 Bravo, with you, climbing through 2,500.
Zero Bravo, would you approach to position?
Right over Camarillo. 90 Bravo.
Zero Bravo, local maneuvers.
Say again?
Zero Bravo, sure.
Oh, I'd like to pick up VFR flight following to Van Nuys. It's a Cessna 172 slant uniform.
November 9 Zero Bravo, squawk 4676.
Squawking 4676, 90 Bravo.
November 9 Zero Bravo, contact SoCal approach 128.75.
Okay, I'll contact SoCal approach 128.7, 90 Bravo, thank you.
Okay, so this was another key mistake that I made here. He says, contact SoCal approach 128.75. And I read back 128.7. No 5, right? And the controller, I made the mistake, and the controller didn't catch the fact that I read back the wrong frequency. So basically, now what happens is I switch over to 128.7, and I'm trying to talk to the controller. And of course they're not hearing me because I'm transmitting on the wrong frequency, and I'm just cruising along like an idiot, wondering why. I was like, wow, it's real quiet on the radio. Why I don't hear anybody, and they're not calling me back. You know, what jerks, right? You know, like it's their fault. And of course I just put in the wrong frequency.
SoCal approach, Cessna November 990 Bravo with you at 3,500.
And I chopped out quite a bit of video here where I'm just cruising along, like waiting for them to talk to me. And then I finally figured out that no, it's the wrong frequency. You know, and I'm like making multiple calls, just assuming it's like, oh, it must be their problem, right? Finally, I figured out, and I get the correct frequency in there, and then of course they can hear me right away.
SoCal Cessna November 990 Bravo with you at 3,500.
990 Bravo, code search for bank altimeter 3007, advising you as Mike, it's on ice.
Okay, 3007, and will advise when I have information at Van Nuys. 90 Bravo.
Estimate 499-285, connect to that bridge 124.
13007. Visual approach and Nuys.
Okay, so I get in touch with SoCal Approach, and they're telling me, okay, let us know when you have the ATIS information for Van Nuys. And then I have to do this thing in here, which is like one of the most annoying things on the radio. Sometimes you're in a situation where you have to monitor one frequency, like in this case the SoCal Approach frequency, and you also have to listen to a different frequency, and you have to listen to both of them at the same time. It's kind of like listening to two different conversations simultaneously. And also the ATIS information at Van Nuys is like really long.
SoCal Cessna November 990 and I do have information, Mike, now for Van Nuys.
990 Bravo, right? Cessna 990 Bravo, connect Van Nuys Tower 119.3.
Okay, we'll contact Van Nuys Tower 119.3, 90 Bravo. Good day.
So then the SoCal Approach controller switches me over to the Van Nuys controller. And that was the big thing about this flight, is like there's a lot of frequency changes and everything in a short amount of time. And now when I look back at this, it's like, oh, this is no big deal. But at the time, it was kind of overwhelming.
Van Nuys Tower, Cessna November 990 Bravo, inbound for a full stop with information, Mike.
Cessna 0 Bravo, Van Nuys Tower, and left base 134 left.
Okay, left base 34 left, 90 Bravo.
And I'm getting back over the area that's got all these hills and everything, so I start getting back into the turbulence. But at least these radio calls were decent.
Okay, checklist. Okay, brakes. Landing light is on. Extra best power.
330 at 14 gust 19er.
330. Okay.
Yeah, there I'm listening to the wind. 330 at 14 gust 19er. So 330 is almost right down the runway, but it's significant. It's 14 knots, gusting to 19 knots.
340 at 11 gust 19er.
340. Okay. Right down the runway.
Just manager Bravo and 340 at 12 gust 19er, only 34 left, clear to land.
34 left, cleared to land, 9 is a Bravo. Okay. Okay, I'm at pattern altitude right now. Okay. Gonna go ahead and turn.
7567 Julie with you.
On your final. A lot of wind. Okay, power's starting to come back. Heartbeat's on. Okay, under 110, first notch of flaps. And I'm landing with the headwind. Okay, fuel's on both. Full rich. Okay. Oh, it's coming up.
340 at 16 gust 19er.
340 at 16 gust 19er, so 16 knots to 19 knots. Direct headwind. There we go. Much better landing. Even with that strong headwind, much better landing. So you can see another angle on this landing here. You can see I come in, and this one, you know, I didn't bounce, I didn't really float much. I did land a little bit flat though, because when you come in, especially with, on a tricycle gear landing, you're supposed to land really on the back wheels, kind of come in like that and land on these wheels first, and then the front wheel comes down. And I landed a little bit flat, like I kind of landed on all three wheels at the same time. And that was really something that I just had a problem with during my training. I mean, it's still something I'm always trying to improve. Just get the nose up and always land on the mains. But this landing was much better than the other one.
Okay, so we'll take off trims, back, wheels on both, flaps up, carburetor off. Okay, clear 3-4 left at Mike. Van Nuys ground, Cessna November 990 Bravo. Clear of 3-4 left at Mike, like to taxi back to the prop park.
690 Bravo, I got all the frequencies except for corners. You're off the taxi to now.
Oh, okay, I got you. Thank you, 90 Bravo. The Alpha 90 Bravo. Sorry about that.
Even after I landed, I still made another mistake. The tower controller had told me, you know, okay, left at Mike, and he told me remain on this frequency. And I basically just got confused about that, and I actually switched over to the ground control frequency, even though he told me to stay on the tower frequency. Fortunately, it was that day, it was the same guy who was working both frequencies. And so then he says, oh, I'm working both, and basically pointing out the fact that I did not do what he told me to do. But it wasn't a huge deal. But still, yeah. So this flight here, again, it was a bunch of things that I normally would have been doing on a longer flight, but it was kind of compressed or condensed into a shorter flight. And again, when I look back on this now, it's like, oh, this is no big deal. But at the time, it was kind of the first time I had done all of the pieces separately, but it was the first time I had done everything together all in one flight. And there was, radio calls that I missed and things I was getting confused about, and having that confusion about what altitude I was going to fly at right at the beginning of the flight, that kind of set the tone for the whole thing. But again, it was a great learning experience. And the key here is that I did this warm-up flight. When I did the next flight, which was the longer cross-country flight, that flight seemed easy in comparison to this one. Because on that flight, I had these long stretches of time when I could just relax and make sure, check everything. I'm like, okay, I'm feeling good. I got everything covered. It was not so frantic like this flight was. And that was the whole point of this flight, right? It made the next flight that much easier. Now, my long cross-country flight up to San Luis Obispo, which was later, that was a whole nother story. That one was pretty wild too. I might make a video about that. Okay, guys, so that is the end of part 2 of my hardest and most challenging and most stressful flight during my flight training as a student pilot. So again, if you guys missed part 1, I will have a link to that in the video description below. And guys, if you enjoy videos like this and airplanes, cool cars, heavy metal, all that stuff, if you enjoy videos like that and you have not already subscribed, please consider subscribing right now. If you enjoyed the video, please give me a thumbs up, and I'll see you soon.